بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So let's look at the next discussion or the next mas'ala that appears in the book of Imam al-Marghinani, Kitab al-Hidayah. Alright, so I've just labeled it here number 2. So we're talking about a few things, but essentially what we're trying to establish is this idea of agency. And what the author wants to establish here is that there's an offer and acceptance. An offer is made, someone accepts it, the contract takes place, the contract is done. Um, and he gives an example of where this can happen in an agency agreement. And he talks about why this is different, or he makes ishara towards why this is different to a financial contract, which I'll explain in a moment for you, inshallah ta'ala. So he says, وَيَنْعَقِدُ بِلَفْظَيْنِ. So, وَيَنْعَقِدُ, the nikah is mun'aqid, it's held to have been done with two words that are expressed, where one of them is in the past tense and the other one is mustaqbil, or in what's called the present or future tense. But here it means amr. مثل أن يقول زوجني. Somebody says to someone, marry me, and that person says in response, zawajtuka. But this example here can be a little bit confusing, so I'm going to come back to it. I'm just going to bracket it off for now, just so we can explain that in a moment. Okay? So normally, in a cut and dry marriage contract, basically, I'll use the example here, is that a man makes an offer to a woman, and he says, so will you marry me? And she says, yes. Okay? And there's two witnesses, and the contract is completed. Or you can work the other way around, where the woman makes an offer. So it can be from either side. The woman makes an offer, and the man accepts that offer. So it can happen that way too. So both ways. That's the cut and dry, normal way of how nikah takes place. Uh, one side makes an offer, the other side accepts the offer, and you got some witnesses, and it's done. Now, I haven't obviously talked about why we need witnesses. That's going to come later on. But that's also a question that comes, why do we need to have witnesses? But we'll come across that later on, inshallah ta'ala. So let me just go back a few steps. Okay, so we've done that one, and I guess we're happy with that. Now, another way is scenario B, which is that the man, in this case, I'm just using a male, could be a female, but in this case, the man appoints someone and he says, Zawijni, get me married. So he appoints an agent and he says to him that you're my agent and I want you to get me married off. And what he then does is he goes off and he goes to somebody and he says, I have a brother called Haroon and he's looking to get married. Would you like to marry him? And she says, yes, I'd like to marry him. If she accepts, then it's done because he's the messenger. And because he's the messenger, he can act on his behalf. And she accepts, the nikah is done. That's one way. Of course, it can happen the other way around, just for clarification, that the woman could appoint someone and say, I'd like to get married. Can you find someone for me so I can get married to them? And he finds someone and he tells them that I found Sister Sumaya, for example, and would you like to marry her? He says, yes, it's done. So it can work both ways and the contract is done. These two are very, very simple scenarios. An important thing just to remember is that in a nikah contract, you should make it clear who who's marrying who. So the agent is just a messenger. He must make sure and he must make clear that he's marrying that person off to Haroon, or the sister is marrying Sumaya, for example. So that should be clarified. And also, in nikah, the agent is just a messenger. Why is that important? Well, we call that safir in Arabic. The reason that's important is very simply is that um, he's just the agent. Once they get married, the contract is between these two people, and if something was to happen, for example, it would be between them two and not between the agent. The agent kind of almost disappears because he's fulfilled his task. His task was to simply get them married off, and he's done that. So, for example, another way you can think about this as well is that when they get married, of course, the man has to give a mahar, not to the agent, but to the woman. Okay, if there was to be a divorce, it would be the man who enacts the divorce, etc., etc., etc. So the contract is between the man and the woman, and the agent is simply a messenger. He has no rights, he has no duties. The rights and duties are conferred upon two parties. Now, I want you to remember this because we're going to see a slight difference in this when it comes to when you appoint an agent for buying and selling. But let me just leave that for a second. Now, third scenario, and there are many scenarios, but I picked this one because this is a common scenario that many of us in our communities are used to. And what usually happens is the father becomes an agent on behalf of his daughter, for example, and then he can marry her off, right? Because she's given him agency, and he can go to somebody and say, "I have a daughter. She's called Sumaya. Would you like to marry her?" And Haroon would say, "Yes, I'd accept the marriage, and it'll be done." And also, you can have as many messengers as you want. So the father could appoint the imam, for example. So that's what usually happens in our masajid, that the imam here, you sit in the mosque, and the imam will say, for example, that father of Sumaya, have you asked her? Are you the agent? And he'll be like, yes, I'm the agent on behalf of Sumaya. And then the imam will become kind of like an agent almost, and he'll conduct the nikah. He'll say to the brother Haroon that will you accept Sumaya as your wife? And he accepts it. It's done, right? So you can have as many agents as you want in a nikah contract, but the contract is essentially between these two people. Remember, okay? So he pays her the mahar and so forth. The contract is always between these two people, right? Now, in buyu, it's slightly different. In buyu, the agent, we'll cover this maybe in advanced lessons. He actually has rights and responsibilities. In other words, if something was to go wrong, the parties would go to him, not to the original person, unlike in nikah. So, for example, I might have a car, and I go to my friend, here's my car, and I say to my friend, can you sell my car for me? And he doesn't need to tell me who he's, when he sells the car, the person buying the car doesn't need to know that he's selling a car on my behalf, because he's responsible, not me. So the agent is responsible. So the agent is responsible. So for example, if I tell someone to sell my car, say for example, this person here, the agent, he will go on the market, or he will sell it in his car showroom, for example, and he's responsible for it. So if anything was to go wrong, the buyer would go to him and not to me, unlike a nikah contract. Okay, and it could happen the other way, where somebody could say to him, buy me a car, buy me a car, and I want you to be the agent, and you're responsible. So he's responsible for it. Now you can see the problem here. You can't have an agency where somebody is responsible and he's doing trading on both sides. It's a kind of like a weird contract. It can't really work. Um, so that's why it's really, really different. In nikah, the agent is only a safir. He's just what's called a messenger. He's just a messenger. Whereas here, he actually has, in buyu', he actually has rights. He has duties and responsibilities. A sort of double jeopardy appears because, for example, I might have a VW car, and I say to him, sell it for me. And he has a friend who is looking for a VW car, and he buys it for him. Can you see what's happening here? He's doing two sides, but he's responsible for he's responsible for anything that might happen. So that's a problem. And also, one of the differences I've just repeated, emphasize again, in nikah, you have to mention who's marrying who. The agent will mention the names. In buyu'u, you don't need to say. You have like everyday examples. So like, you might buy something on Amazon, right? So you're the buyer, right? What Amazon usually do is they have a seller. Okay, so you'll buy something on Amazon. Say you buy, I don't know, I usually buy on Amazon sometimes, beard oil. Right, so here's a bottle beard oil, and the seller is selling it, and he's using Amazon as the agent. So once it comes to me through Amazon, if I have a problem with it, I won't go to the seller. I'll go to Amazon, because he's the agent and he's responsible, and they will deal with the transaction. They will take ownership of it, and they will then deal with it as they need to. So that's what happens in financial transactions. We keep it separate to avoid conflict. I hope that's clear. And if you have any questions, inshallah, you can always reach out to me. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.